I'm not a real Spanish teacher. I'm not a Spanish professor. I'm not an official teacher of any kind. In fact, even though I do have a college degree, I consider myself formally uneducated. What I am is a guy who loves Spanish. And I don't just say that because it sounds nice. I mean it. I love the words. I love the grammar. I love looking for patterns, seeing how things are the same as they are in English, how they're different than English. And that's what these Spanish quickies are all about. Me showing you the patterns and shortcuts I've discovered over the last 15 years. The cool connections I make, the light bulbs that go off in my head, so you don't have to waste the months and years I did. And that has never been more true than it is about today's video. What I'm about to share with you might not be technically right, I'm not a linguist, but it's an awesome way to look at things. And if you look at words like I'm gonna show you how to look at words, you'll save yourself so many headaches in the coming months and years, because some of the biggest problems we gringos face when learning Spanish are solved simply by knowing, don't laugh, how words work. Hola, soy Jordan and this is a Spanish Quickie. Fast, easy Spanish lessons from somebody who speaks your language. Okay, before we jump in, I'm happy to announce that all my videos are now available on iTunes, Stitcher, and pretty much every other podcast app. I've uploaded them as both video and audio, so you can now watch or listen to every Spanish Quickie while you're driving, exercising, or whatever. All the subscription links are below this video or in the description. Will you do me a favor? Leave me a review, especially on iTunes. I originally set up the podcast to make my videos more accessible to you, watch where you want, listen to just the audio, download it, but then I quickly realized it's also a great way to reach more people. A big part of getting iTunes to suggest my podcast to other gringos is downloads and reviews. So please download my podcast on iTunes, and even better, leave me a review. Just type in Gringo Español, no squiggly on the N is necessary, and you'll find me. Okay, how words work. Words have no inherent value. Words aren't born with meaning. If I say POMPLEDON to you right now, do you know what I said? Does what I said have any meaning at all? No, it doesn't. Words have no inherent meaning. Words gain their meaning when at least, two people communicating with each other both have the same picture in their heads when they see or hear a word, right? If I tell you that POMPLEDON means wig, do you have a POMPLEDON? That statement now has meaning even though I just made up that word. Some people like to argue with me about this while not really telling me why I'm wrong. I love those types. But it's crystal clear with this word, chip. What's a chip? If you gamble a lot, it might be the circle thing used to represent money in a casino. If you're British, it might be a fried potato strip, which I would call a French fry. If you're American, it might be a potato chip, which I believe the Brits call crisps. You see, the word chip is merely four letters next to one another until it's used with context, and when the context is understood by both the sender and receiver, the word has no meaning. I look at it like this. Words are to thoughts as money is to things. Back in the day, before money, we used to barter or trade. However, if you had something I wanted, but I didn't have something you wanted, we either couldn't trade things or we had to involve some third party, a three-way trade. Then money came along and allowed us to exchange things with anybody. If you have a chicken, I just give you the money that is used to represent the value of the chicken. Then you take the money wherever you want. Well, words work the same way, but instead of allowing us to exchange things, they allow us to exchange thoughts. So you have a thought, translate it to a word in English and say it. Then the person you're talking to takes that word and translates it into a thought. As long as you both picture the same thing at the sight or sound of that word, you're good. Communication, beautiful. When there are two languages being used, it's the same thing, just with extra steps. You translate your thought into an English word and say it. Then the person with whom you're talking translates that English word into a Spanish word and finally back into a thought. You with me? That's how words work. Words are used to describe the pictures in our heads, our thoughts. A word only takes on a specific meaning when the two people communicating have the same picture in their head, thoughts, when they see or hear that word. This might sound simple and obvious, but getting this wrong is what leads us gringos to some of the biggest troubles we face when learning Spanish. Simply the way we talk about words, definitions, and meanings leads us us to great confusion. For example, we say stuff like comer means to eat. Technically, that's an incorrect statement. Comer is simply 5 letters next to each other. It means nothing. A better way to express the relationship between those two words is this. Comer is what they normally say in Spanish when they're talking about somebody putting food in their mouth, chewing, and then swallowing. We would normally say to eat in English when we're talking about somebody putting food in their mouth, chewing, and then swallowing. So they normally say comer in Spanish when we normally say to eat in English. Not just comer means to eat. And this isn't just semantics. This is important. It not only affects the way you think, but has very specific consequences. Let's go to Google Translate and take a look at eat. When I type in to eat, it gets all weird. Google Translate might not be perfect, but it's helpful, and let's face it, it's what we all use most of the time. If you type eat on the left side, it'll give you a bunch of different stuff on the right side. As you can see, the word comer is indeed at the very top of the page in its own section. Because it's up top in its own section, Google is telling us when we say eat, they can and normally do say comer. But see all this other stuff down here? Those are all secondary possibilities. Other words they can also say when we say eat. When we say eat, they can say consumir. That probably looks familiar. That looks more like consume, but that just means the two words have the same origin probably. But I'm telling you right now from experience, the word consumir is often used when we would normally say eat, not just consume. Consumir is used more often in Spanish than consume is in English. Another example, terminar. That probably has the same origin as the word terminate in English. Some people might say terminar means terminate, but to me, from experience, I know terminar is more often what they say when we say to end or to finish. But end doesn't simply mean terminar. End can be what we say when they say terminar. But we can also say finish when they say terminar. And they can also say acabar when we say to end, as you see down here in the verb section. Words don't mean words. Words are used to represent thoughts. When we're talking, we're trading thoughts and choosing the best words to trade those thoughts efficiently. Okay, like I said before, not understanding how words work leads us gringos to a lot of confusion when learning Spanish. This has actually come up a couple times in past videos. The first time it came up is when we talked about saber versus conocer. I had to make a whole video about this subject because it's very confusing. It was one of my most requested videos. And it's very confusing only when you don't understand how words work. Both saber and conocer mean to know. That's what they tell us. But we know that's not true. Words don't mean words. Words mean thoughts. Let's take a closer look. When we use the word to know in English, we're really using it two different ways. I didn't notice this until a couple years ago. We use to know like to know facts. I know the words to a song. I know the capital of Spain. But we also use the word to know when we mean we're familiar with something or somebody. I know my friend John really means I'm familiar with John. So in English, we use to know two different ways. To know facts and to be familiar with somebody or something. Well, in Spanish, they have two different words for the two different to knows. When we use to know, like to know facts, they use the word saber. I know the words to a song would be yo sé las palabras. Sé comes from saber, it's irregular. You know the capital of Spain, sabes la capital de España. But when we use to know as in be familiar with, they use the word conocer. So I know John would be conozco a John, because really you're saying I'm familiar with John. See what's going on? To know doesn't mean saber or conocer. When we say to know as in to know facts, they say saber. When we say to know as in to be familiar with somebody, they say conocer. See how looking at words my way clears up the confusion between saber and conocer immediately? Check out the video called Saber versus conocer for more examples. The next time this came up is when we talked about verbs like gustar. Remember, I like is kind of weird in Spanish. I eat is como. I open is abro. I drink is bebo. But I like, me gusta? What is going on? Why do none of the first three examples have a pronoun and end in O, but the last one does have a pronoun and doesn't end in O? I like does not mean me gusta. There's really no word that has the same origin as like in Spanish. But when we say like in English, they can, and usually do, say gustar in Spanish, which is more to please. And to please works differently than to like. I like it, but it pleases me. Both those sentences mean the same thing, right? You get the same same picture in your head from both sentences, no? But they're structured differently. When we say I like, they usually say me gusta, which is structured like it's pleasing to me, which if you're familiar with how pronouns work in Spanish isn't that confusing at all. But if you type I like into Google, it tells you it's me gusta, nothing more. And that's what leads to the confusion. Now, this whole word thing comes up often in another way. For words like to eat, the picture is pretty clear. It's when somebody takes food, puts it in their mouth, chews, and eventually swallows the food. But what's the difference between to eat and to snack, or to nosh, or to munch, or to nibble? And even if you can clearly explain the differences between those words, what are the chances Spanish has the exact equivalent of all those words? It's pretty much zero. A while back, I had a French girlfriend, and I found it funny because she was always asking me stuff like, what's the word for when you kick a brick? And I'd be like, kick a brick? Then, what's the word for when you know the answer but can't think of it? And I'd be like, you know the answer but can't think of it? I just made up those horrible examples, but you get the point. Sometimes they have a specific word in another language that we just don't have. In Spanish, they have a verb for eating every meal. Desayunar, comer, or almorzar, cenar. We just eat breakfast, eat lunch, and eat dinner. That's it. I hope you liked this video. I hope I made everything clear. I don't know if I hit a home run with this one. It's my first time getting these thoughts fully out of my head. Ask me any questions you have or argue with me if you want. As long as you're polite, I always love a good debate. I made this video today for a reason. We're going to be focusing on vocabulary in the upcoming videos, so I wanted you to understand how words work before we start learning all the words. Okay, don't forget to subscribe to the video or audio podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or pretty much any podcast app in the world, and leave me a review too. That'll really help me. Then I'll see you next time. Hasta luego. Adios, amigos.